Good morning, or is it afternoon? Good morning. It's time for one more story. This one is pretty self-explanatory, so I won't say anything about it. We'll just start in with it. It's called Heather, Her Dad, and the Bagging of Eternal Reminiscences. Not very long ago, in fact it was only yesterday, I met a little girl. Not a very little girl, but a girl just big enough to do a very special job. Kind of a happy chore, a delivery chore. In fact, we could call this girl a delivery girl. She is, in fact, known to me as the little delivery girl. She has dimples on each side of a very pleasing smile and a dark glistening flash in her eyes, which together with her smile makes you want to know her right away. Yesterday, she delivered to me a package of joyous hope. In fact, it was a little brown bag of joyous hope. The bag was full to overflowing, and on the side, in very happy printing, were the words, Joyous Hope, surrounded by little flowers and rising butterflies. I had not ordered this package, though I was certainly in need of its contents. I've been feeling quite joyous since I first saw that lovely happy face coming up the lane to peer in through my screen door. As it turns out, I knew the little girl's father for many years of my youth, but had no idea that he and his lovely daughter had embarked on such a worthwhile and adventuresome business, though we had in fact talked of the need of such a venture in those days when we dreamed dreams large and small. Now, here she was, with dimples, smile, and brown bag full of joyous hope, and a short note from her father saying, "Hope you are well and gaining happiness through surrender to that which is eternal." That is all it said. But the little girl said that if I followed her, she would show me her home and bring me to her father in his eternal wonder and joy bag factory. Of course I said I would follow, being so happy to meet her and to hear of her adventures with my old friend, who now, it would seem, lived nearby in some strange and magical place where the day was spent bagging joy and laughter and hope and peaceful reminiscences. We arrived at her home by way of a large garden, a garden of irregular shape, with small and large trees and a path that flowed this way and that way, up and down, over little hills and valleys, and rises and slopes, and around flower beds, and through beds of the most miraculous-smelling herbs, and over little wooden bridges, and little stone bridges, and through patches of certain carefully selected vegetables and flowers, planted in rows, and in circles, and star shapes, and something called random shapes. "These are in random shapes," the little delivery girl said, "because these vegetables, or these flowers, have a multitude of uses. That is, a multiplicity of auras and effects. For our business, of course. For my dad's business, and so, of course, for my business too. For they were partners in this adventure, it would seem." She was also quite bright and informed about the ins and the outs of the strange and wonderful partnership with her father, the printer of bags, the gardener, and of course my old friend. After a lengthy journey through the garden, a journey which filled me with wonder and amazement and some slight sense of confusion, we arrived at a rather small, rather quiet-feeling door, a screen door with fancy little spindles and corner brackets, and over the door a most remarkable sign, a hand-lettered sign in blues and gold and trimmed in violet and green. In fact, I think if you looked carefully, you would find every color of the rainbow in this sign. It said, Mr. Keith Davis and Heather, purveyors of dreams, good wishes, and eternal reminiscences. Established in the year of our Lord. I had not seen my old friend for quite some time, so it was with some misgivings that I stood in front of the screen door while the little girl went on into the house, the factory, the place of bags and the bagging of peace and joy. It was then, while standing there under a rather slender, graceful tree at the edge of the garden, that I realized my bag of joyous hope, the one I had received only this morning, had come from the garden I was now standing in. In fact, as we had passed over one of the little wooden bridges, I had been almost swept by nothing other than joyous hope. Things that had seemed very difficult or almost impossible just a day or two ago seemed to be quite possible, in fact, probable. In fact, I was looking forward to their challenge as I stood in front of the magical screen door, awaiting the appearance of my long-lost friend. The misgivings I had were over wondering how my friend would seem to me and how I would seem to him. Once we had been very close. Would we still share the same wonder and joy about things? Would we still laugh so easily over little things of blessed nothingness? Could we still skip down country lanes as we once did? While I was wondering all these things, a golden bee buzzed intently at the leaves of the tree overhead. The leaves were very lightly coated with golden nectar. I followed the bee with my eyes until I heard the unmistakable sound of a screen door, a slightly squeaky screen door, being opened, and the unmistakable sound of my old friend's voice. "Big boy," he called gently out, standing on the wooden steps. He always called me Big Boy, though I was neither big nor still a boy. Still, I liked it. I liked being Big Boy once again, in that magical garden filled with the smell of wonder and the love and sound of trees and the gentle voices of my friend and his lovely dimpled daughter. "Come on in," he said. "You're just in time for some printing." It was as though I had just seen him the day before instead of several years ago, as was the case. "Come on in," the delivery girl said, pulling up her bright red socks. Inside, the shop was just as colorful as being in the garden, with shelves and shelves of brightly colored bags and pastel bags and plain brown bags like the one I'd just received. In the very center of the large room was a large, hand-turned printing press with a large turning wheel, not unlike the wheel of a sailing ship. This was flooded with a slightly rose-colored light from a large skylight overhead. Along the far wall was a long workbench with all the tools of a printer and engraver. The walls were of soft yellows and gold, with white trim around the small paned windows. Plants hung from overhead, suspended in woven hangers of subtle earth colors, burnt reds and ochres, and all the shades of brown and tan. The plants were mostly green with a few flowers, many of them trailing almost to the floor. A soft brown dog lay asleep on the rug, while a distinctly calico cat was cleaning itself on the far windowsill. "It's the fullness of the summer," my friend said, "and we're busy with orders, especially from our old customers who know the herbal essences and the magic of the short summer nights. We usually deliver early in the morning, that being the best time for most of our messages," he said, sharing a wink with his daughter. Her dimpled wink out of the corner of her face filled me again with joy and left me feeling I was indeed in the presence of some very special magical enterprise of which I still knew almost nothing. Lying on a small table just next to the printing wheel were 6 or 8 bags, each one able to hold slightly less than a peck, but slightly more than just a little. One bag was brown like mine. The others were colored, some soft, seemingly pastel, with a satiny finish, and some of the primary colors, bright red, deep blue, and yellow. It appeared to me that all the colors of the spectrum of the rainbow were represented by the bags on a small table. "Now what's the first one?" my friend said of his daughter, asked of his daughter. "Forgiveness and understanding," she said, "some of both, with violets and swallows and the promise of eternal spring." "A good order," he said, "a tall order, and one long overdue, I suspect." "The one who ordered it certainly seemed ready for a change of heart," she said. "Good," said my old friend, as he placed a pastel bag on the press and adjusted the engraving plate. Then, with an expert turning of the wheel, the bag was drawn tightly down to become one with the plate. In a few moments, I was looking at a circle of violets with rising swallows. And in the center of the circle, the words in simple yet old-fashioned lettering, "Forgiveness and Understanding." "Aha, I like it," my friend said. "Just right, I think," said the little delivery girl. "I think it will do the trick." With that, she carefully took the bag from her father and headed for the screen door in the garden. "Follow me," she said with another wink and dimpled smile, and again I was filled with joy and magic. "The next one is the pale yellow, to be filled with patience and trust," she said over her shoulder as she held the door for me. "Patience and trust coming right up," her father said as he too shot me a wink while the little girl took my sleeve. With that, she led me to one of the little stone bridges where a tiny brook flowed around and through the shaded area of the garden near the stone wall, now covered with moss green and rust-colored in the filtered sunlight. She carefully opened the bag, with the printing not dry on its side, and placed it on a shaded rock, almost under the bridge, but still on the damp, thick grass. "The violets bloom here in the spring," she said, "and this essence is gathered by the stones of the bridge and in the flowing of the brook, and held gently there for anyone who has a need for a new springtime and has faith in the forgiveness of ageless rock and the flowing of springs, the giving of the eternal waters." I said nothing, being quite content to sit in a patch of sun against the coolness of the stone wall as she placed a pebble from the brook into the bag to keep the gentle breezes from blowing it from its special spot. A spot, I guessed, for the gathering and the filling of the eternal essences. "The reminiscences of eternal joy," the little girl said almost to herself as she settled in beside me. I was beginning to understand. In fact, I felt strangely forgiven on that spot for all my shortcomings, both real and imagined. I felt, in fact, at peace. I felt myself following the flowing of the little brook throughout that marvelous garden. And when it disappeared out of sight around one of the gentle knolls, I found it again just in front of me as it appeared as if by magic from under the little stone bridge. After a time, how long I have no idea, I asked, "How long will it take for the bag to be filled?" "Not long today," she said. "You seem to be helping a great deal. Come, we'll see if my father has another bag being printed." With that, she rose instantly with one smooth motion from her spot beside me and walked rather briskly down the path. In fact, she skipped when she approached one of the little wooden bridges. I realized we were not taking the direct route back to the printing shop, but were again circling the long way around and through the amazing garden. She skipped again as we passed a small pinwheel twirling on the end of a little round stick placed in the center of a bed of brightly colored bachelor buttons with a border of pastel button zinnias. To my complete surprise, as I turned to look over my shoulder at the twirling pinwheel, I too found myself skipping and actually did a complete twirl right there in the path, skipping all the while. As we approached the print shop, my friend was standing in the door with a pale yellow bag in his outstretched hand. "Let's get this one started right away," he said. "They always have trouble waiting for these." The girl carefully took the open bag with the word "Patience" printed in green and blue on the side. A dormant vine, which hung from a cocoon of the swallow-tailed butterfly, circled the word, while overhead was a horizon line with just a few rays of the promised sun appearing in gold within an aura of wistful mauve. Above, in a semicircle barely visible, yet distinctly there, was the word "Trust." As we turned toward the garden and the placing of the bag for its slow and painful filling, I noticed another pinwheel attached to the side of the print shop. I was sure I hadn't noticed it before. It was twirling faster than the one in the garden, which had appeared to be multicolored. This one was turning so fast that it appeared to be pure white. In fact, with the sun spiraling down on it, it became for brief moments a blinding white light. I couldn't tell, because of its speed, whether it was painted white or if, like the one in the garden, was actually all the colors of the rainbow, but turning so fast as to appear to be a flashing white light. I was about to ask about the pinwheels. It seemed nothing in this marvelous place was without special purpose, when the girl called me from the bend in the path, and I, of course, followed, still filled with wonder and growing contentment. We usually get 2 or 3 calls on a bag of Patience, because, you see, the one who ordered it, if he ordered it for himself, simply can't wait for it to arrive. This one was ordered by a friend for a friend who doesn't know it's coming, so we shouldn't be interrupted, which of course would slow the whole thing down. I nodded in silence, as though I understood. In fact, I was beginning to understand. Things were becoming increasingly clearer to me as we rounded a bend just behind a knoll where a miniature desert appeared, much to my surprise. "In here you will find the soft settling of patience," she said, picking a spot next to a tiny cactus-like plant growing in the semi-shade of a rich brown rock. "Father says this cactus is counting the grains of sand in the desert, and when it gets to know them all by name, it will bloom." I sat down in the heat and the sand, feeling compelled to take off my shoes and bury my hungry toes in the soft brown sand. Father and I once spent many days here listening to the sand and the whispers of faith and trust. I must admit to you now that it wasn't until after days and nights had passed that I heard the first whisper. It woke me out of a daze when I honestly felt I could not last one more hour, one more moment. And then we stayed on, I have no idea how long, listening to the whispers of the sand and the song of the little cactus. It was a song of promise, a promise of blooming. Do you know that a cactus in the late evening sometimes sheds tears of joy to caress the sand? It's her promise to him, her song of blooming to his warm and gentle waiting. I said nothing, content to believe her. In fact, somehow I knew she was telling the truth that lived with her in this garden, the truth that followed her on her paths of delivery. I began to dream, gazing at the little cactus and the slightly quivering bag, now filling slowly with the patience that circled everything in the tiny desert. I, too, was ready to stay there for days on end, my toes drawing up the eternal essence of faith and trust. Sometime later, I found myself following the little girl once again, back to the shop and her father's busy printing press with a large ship's wheel. Once again, we appeared to be going the long way around. In fact, Throughout the day, as we placed bag after bag in special and particular places in the garden seemed to grow, to become larger, more beautiful and wonderful with each trip to and from the print shop. The colors of the flowers became so intense that I found myself actually squirming in delight, unwilling even to contain my inner ecstasy. I became the flowers, the ridges, the exquisite trees, the little bridges. Oh yes, the running brook. I began to anticipate things. One moment I'd be very aware of a strong desire to see a willow tree, to feel its swaying branches tossing across my face. And around the next bend, a willow tree, gently tossing, would beckon me closer, asking me to touch and caress it. Or I would imagine myself in a floating golden chariot drifting through this paradise, saying I love you to everyone in my path. And just across the stone bridge ahead would be the most lovely golden glider on chains. So it eased back and forth as I rested within my dream, saying, I love you to everyone who appeared. Old friends, family, those I'd counted as enemies, as betrayers, I loved them all. And as if by magic, they in response would warm toward me, waving kind hellos as they moved upon their way. My body came to feel completely empty, like one of the little bags, yet it instantly filled with everything I saw and felt in the garden. I contained everything to overflowing. Yes, to overflowing. Yet I carried no weight or heaviness with me on the path. Even sadness, which swept in on soft velvet wings from the little brook where we filled a bag with humility, though completely filling me with sadness and regret, soon became replaced with quiet humility, self-forgiveness, and indescribable joy, making me light as though ageless. Yes, I became ageless there in the garden. I was 3 or 10 or 3,000 or 6 million years old, or rather as old as I needed to become one with whatever approached me in the garden. A tiny seedling or an ancient tree, or even lovely old logs, living in beautiful decay on their way back to the soil, hosting a growing city of mushrooms and moss, and even tiny trees growing in their soft, mushy skin. Sitting on a log such as this, in the late afternoon, the little delivery girl sensed my ageless wonder, and touching the back of my hand, as though I were her child, she said, "Believing is most important. Believing is seeing. Not seeing is believing." And then she was softly up again, this time taking a direct route to the print shop. "Father says we have just one delivery this evening. He suggested you might come along with me. It's not too far. It's just a way, a pleasant way. Will you come? It's a special order from an old friend for an old friend." Of course, I said. Of course, I said. I'd completely lost track of time and circumstances. My wife will be expecting me. When we got back to the shop, my old friend handed me a fresh peach to quench my thirst and sat down on a bench in front of the window. Next to him was a multi-hued bag, slightly larger than those we had been placing all day. "We do have one last delivery this evening," he said. "An evening message of love and wonder." He softly patted the bag and said that he was sure it was now ready for delivery. I now noticed that he was wearing a pale blue apron covering his knees and tied at the back with a golden string. He had a pocket over his heart that contained a small steel ruler and 3 small etching tools. Stitched on the pocket, there appeared to be a rose of many soft colors. I said, "That's nice to have a rose stitched on your pocket." He said, Come closer. It's a very special rose." I drew close, and to my surprise, saw that it wasn't a rose at all, but two spirals, one within the other. And the spirals were made up of words stitched in all the colors of the rainbow, starting at the center of the spiral with deep red and winding out till the outside ring was in pure gold. The other spiral started with deep red at the largest ring and wound down inside the other spiral, ending in a small circle of the same gold. The words of both spirals were the same. They said, "The inside is the outside, is the inside, is the outside, is the inside, is the outside, is the inside." Once again, as I stood back, they appeared as a rose, the most beautiful rose, embroidered with loving care. "Don't be long now," he said to his lovely daughter. "Dinner will be ready when you get back." He rose and silently took my arm. Walking me to the screen door, he said, "You'll come again, big boy. We'll sit in the garden and talk and hum tunes of boyish delight. You'll show me my garden. It's different, of course, for everyone, and I'd love to see it with you." I hugged him like I'd done so many times over the years when I was moved beyond words to say hello or goodbye. I went through the door following the girl, and under the tree with the golden bee, turned and said, "Yes." With that I was gone, down the path once more, briskly so as to catch up to the delivery girl before she reached the street. She held the bag gently in front of her with both hands, as though being careful not to spill any of its contents. The bag was obviously full to overflowing with essences and wondrous peace as I glided along silently beside her. She was smiling to herself, her dimples very deep and her eyes flashing, reminding me of the pinwheel of early afternoon by the screen door in the sunlight. I soared within my bursting heart, paying no heed to where we were headed, which streets we were taking, or how long was the journey. I was totally at peace, complete for the first time in my life, wanting nothing, possessing everything to overflowing. I flowed as a brook through the garden of my utter happiness. We turned a corner and went through a gate, then up a little path through a small and pleasant yard. Some brightly colored zinnias caught my eye, and I stopped short. We were in my own backyard. The girl walked slowly on around the corner of the house to the porch. I followed, not knowing what to make of this. Why were we crossing my yard? Was this a shortcut known to the little girl? I'd never seen her cross my yard before. I turned the corner of the house to find the girl had disappeared. Then I heard the unmistakable sound of the swing on the porch, the one my wife had wanted and I'd built some years ago. There on the swing, her hair piled high upon her head, sat my wife, and beside her, still smiling and flashing, the little delivery girl. "Hello there," my wife said. Her eyes, too, were filled with the same lovely flashing. She smiled. "I've been waiting for you here on our swing. Such a lovely evening. We've a present for you. I wanted to give you all the moments and pieces of moments we've shared in our lifetime. Just the essence of the dreams and joys we've shared, wanted to share, should have shared, could have shared, would have shared, want to share, will yet share. The eternal reminiscences of our youth, when your dreams ran across my eyes and moistened them with longing and wonder. When we were young and we met, we walked in the moonlight, and your hair smelled of wildwood. I see you still in the dawn. Now, I'm older. You remind me still of wildwood and dreams, dreams with open eyes of love. This gift from the garden you gathered yourself today with this lovely little girl. It's yours because you are willing to follow and humbly empty yourself. finally on this day, so I could give you the gifts I always wanted so much for you. The little girl rose softly from the swing and beckoned me to sit in her place. It was then she pulled a rather large rose-colored envelope from under her sweater. Father thought you might want to place this here on the porch. I opened the envelope and found a round piece of shiny, multicolored cardboard. It was cut at angles towards the center. I knew at once it was the pinwheel from his doorway, unfolded so I could read once again in double spirals. The inside is the outside is the inside. The outside is the inside is the outside. I folded it to form the wheel and placed the pin through the hole in the center. I forced the pin into one of the wooden posts of the porch, and it began to spin, faster and faster, until once again it flashed in the blinding light. It was the same light I saw in the little girl's eyes, and now found in my wife's eyes as they smiled at me from our swing. "We'll be having dinner soon," the little girl said. "Thank you for the lovely order," she said to my wife, and with that she pulled up her bright red socks and turned, a dimpled smile, a flash of eye, one more wink, and she was on her way again, leaving us there on our porch, our little swing, gliding quietly in the golden dusk, filled to overflowing with all the ever-changing, flowing colors of love. The end. Thank you. I want to make a little comment about this story. This story was written 40 years ago. There are real people in this story. And as I read it now, I see that in addition to the story about real people, it contains elements of, in order for us, especially us males, Western males, we have to get in touch with what might be called our more feminine side, which is the little girl, the wife. Our more feminine side, which is more receptive and less pushing, in order to be emptied and then filled with our newness, with our being born again. And so that, I think, is basically the story. There is a magic garden. We're all in it. We're just really being busy, and our bags are full of ourself. And so we have difficulty in our transformation to something new until we can empty out a little bit. That's all I'll say about the story right now. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, this morning when I was getting lightly prepared to read this story, my preparations are very light. I came across this poem, and I don't know when I wrote this poem, but it was much later than writing this story, I'm quite sure. Yeah. But there's a little connection, I think, so I'll read it. Song of Songs, Song of Songs. I ache for a moment of worth, that feeling it matters, I matter. No anvil to pound, or horses to shod, no damsel to save, but this one, the little girl in me, the precious one, who could sing the song, dance the tune. My sword is rusty, the blood tired. Let the world lie unconquered. It's welding I would do, melting the no, the 1,000, 10,000, the uncountable no's into a river of yes, that trickling together, that coming together, flowing together, that torrent of knowing, the global warming of you and I, us and them, ripening to wine, drunk in the sun, dancing the dance, singing the song, a chorus of telling ourselves it was worth it. That's enough for today. Thank you. Yeah, master teacher used to say, if you're male, in order to undergo a transformation, you have to become a little more female, and if you're too female, you have to become a little more male. You have to get somewhere more, because we're all male and female, somewhere a little more centered.